Crystal clinked against crystal as laughter echoed through the Ashford ballroom, a sound I'd learned to tune out over the past 3 weeks. 200 guests dressed in designer gowns and custom tuxedos swirled through the space like expensive ghosts, and I was invisible to every single one of them. Exactly how it should be. Exactly how I needed it to be. I carried the tray of wine glasses with practiced precision, weaving between clusters of Connecticut's wealthiest families without making eye contact. The uniform they'd given me was simple, gray and white cotton that felt scratchy against my skin, but it paid $40 an hour under the table. 4 hours tonight meant $160. 3 more shifts this week would cover another small chunk of the mountain of debt crushing my chest every time I thought about it. $180,000. That's what the experimental treatment cost. That's what stood between my mother and a fighting chance at surviving stage 3 ovarian cancer. Insurance had laughed in our faces, called it unproven methodology and not medically necessary, as if watching your only parent waste away was somehow necessary. I'd been translating documents for corporate clients since graduating with a linguistics degree 2 years ago. 5 languages fluent, 3 more conversational, and it barely paid $3,000 a month. Rent, utilities, groceries, gas, my own student loans. Nothing left over. Definitely not enough to save a life. So here I was, serving wine to people who spent more on a single dress than I made in 6 months. More Bordeaux here. A woman with severe cheekbones and a diamond necklace that could fund a small country thrust her empty glass toward me without looking up from her conversation. I refilled it silently. A living piece of furniture. The ballroom itself was obscene in its luxury. Marble floors reflected the light from 3 massive chandeliers, each one dripping with crystals that probably cost more than my car. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked manicured gardens that never seemed to have a leaf out of place. Oil paintings in gilded frames lined the walls, the kind you'd see in museums. Old money didn't just buy things. It bought a whole different reality. Rebecca Ashford held court near the center of the room, her silver gown catching light with every calculated movement. 52 years old and surgically maintained to look 40, she commanded attention the way queens must have centuries ago. Absolute and terrifying. I'd learned quickly to stay out of her direct line of sight. Women like her noticed staff only when we made mistakes. I was refilling glasses near the bar when I felt eyes on me. Not the dismissive glance of someone needing a refill, but real attention. Heavy. Deliberate. My spine stiffened instinctively. Across the ballroom, partially obscured by a marble column, a man watched me with unsettling focus. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal suit that fit him like it had been made specifically for his body, which it probably had been. Dark hair slicked back from a sharp face, and even from this distance I could see his eyes tracking my movement through the crowd. Something about his stillness set him apart from the other guests. Everyone else moved constantly, performed constantly, laughed and gestured and networked with exhausting energy. He simply stood there, a glass of what looked like whiskey untouched in his hand, and watched. I looked away quickly, unnerved. The last thing I needed was attention. Hannah, Marcus, the event coordinator, appeared at my elbow. Table 7 needs champagne. The Moet, not the Veuve. Got it. I moved toward the kitchen, grateful for something to focus on besides the stranger's gaze. When I returned with the champagne bucket, Tyler Ashford had appeared near the bar with 3 of his friends. All of them in their late 20s. All of them already drunk despite it only being 9:30. I recognized the particular looseness in their movements, the too loud laughter, the careless way they took up space. Tyler was Rebecca's only child, and it showed. 28 years old with the face of someone who'd never been told no. Blonde hair artfully messy, expensive watch-catching light as he gestured wildly while telling some story his friends found hilarious. I knew his type. Had dealt with them at every catering job, every event, every place where wealth concentrated itself. I tried to angle past them, head down, invisible. "Hey!" Tyler's hand shot out, catching my arm. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough that I had no choice but to stop. "You're new." "I've been here 3 weeks, sir." I kept my voice neutral, professional. Can I get you something? You can tell me your name. His breath smelled like gin and entitlement. Hannah. Hannah. He repeated it like he was tasting something. His friends had gone quiet, watching with the anticipation of people who sensed entertainment coming. You don't look at us when we talk to you, Hannah. That's rude. Every instinct screamed at me to apologize, to deflect, to make this go away. But something in his tone, the casual cruelty of it, made my jaw tighten. I looked up, met his bloodshot blue eyes directly. I was taught not to stare at guests. If you prefer otherwise, I can adjust. Wrong answer. I knew it immediately. Tyler's smile went sharp. Oh, we've got a smart one here. Did you hear that, Mom? He raised his voice, projecting across the space. The help has opinions. Rebecca Ashford turned, and I felt my stomach drop. She glided over with a smile that never touched her eyes, assessing me the way someone might examine an insect. Is there a problem, darling? Just teaching proper etiquette. Tyler plucked a glass of red wine from my tray. Full to the brim, the liquid dark as blood. I think Hannah here needs a lesson in humility. Don't you agree? Rebecca's smile widened. Perhaps you're right. I saw it coming half a second before it happened. Not enough time to move. Just enough to understand what was about to occur. Tyler lifted the glass and poured it directly over my head. Cold liquid splashed across my scalp, soaking instantly through my hair. Wine ran down my face, my neck, saturating my uniform. The gray fabric turned dark and heavy, clinging to my skin. Drops fell onto the pristine marble floor. My shoes filled with it. Laughter exploded around us. Someone was filming. Multiple people, actually. Phones raised like this was the highlight of their evening. Perhaps it was. Oops. Tyler's voice dripped with mock concern. How clumsy of me. I stood there, wine dripping from my chin, and felt rage burn so hot in my chest I thought it might consume me from the inside. My hands shook. Not from fear. From the sheer force of wanting to smash the tray across his smug face, to scream every curse I'd ever learned in 5 languages, to make him feel a fraction of what he'd just done. But I didn't. Because I needed this job. Because my mother needed that treatment. Because people like Tyler Ashford always won, and people like me always swallowed our pride and survived. So I grabbed a bar towel, wiped my face with hands that barely trembled, and said quietly, "My apologies. I'll clean this up immediately." Rebecca made a dismissive sound. "See that you do, and do try to be more careful in the future." I bent down, began blotting wine from the marble floor, and let my hair fall forward to hide my face, hide the tears of fury burning behind my eyes that I refused, absolutely refused, to let fall. What I didn't see was the man across the room setting down his untouched whiskey with deliberate care. Didn't see the way his jaw tightened, or how his hand curled into a fist before he forced it to relax. Didn't see him pull out his phone and make a single quiet call. "Franco," Giovanni Moretti said, his voice low and controlled. "I need you to find out everything about the woman in the gray uniform. Everything. Name, address, family, debts. I want it within the hour." He watched Hannah Evans finish cleaning the floor, watched her stand with perfect dignity, despite being soaked in wine, watched her continue working as if nothing had happened, and something in him, something he'd thought dead years ago, shifted. People who humiliated the vulnerable for entertainment were the worst kind of cowards. And Giovanni Moretti had very specific feelings about cowards. 2 hours and 47 minutes after Tyler Ashford poured wine over my head, Rebecca summoned me to her private office. The party had thinned out, guests filtering toward valets and town cars. Their entertainment for the evening concluded. I'd finished my shift mechanically, serving and clearing and smiling until my face ached, all while smelling like a vineyard and feeling the sticky residue of humiliation drying in my hair. Marcus knocked on the office door before ushering me inside. Rebecca sat behind an antique desk that probably predated the Revolutionary War, perfectly composed despite the late hour. No wine stains on her. No exhaustion pulling at her surgically tightened features. Hannah Evans. She didn't invite me to sit. "Your services are no longer required." The words took a moment to penetrate my exhaustion-fogged brain. I'm sorry. You created an uncomfortable situation for our guests tonight. Made a scene. Tyler was mortified by the attention your clumsiness drew. She said it with such conviction, I almost believed she believed it. We can't have staff who disrupt the atmosphere of our events. My fingernails dug into my palms. I understand. If I could collect payment for this week, I'm afraid that won't be possible. The cleaning costs for the wine damage to our marble floors, the distress caused to our guests. She waved a manicured hand dismissively. Consider it compensation for the inconvenience you caused. Marcus will show you out. $450. 3 days of work at $40 an hour. Gone, because I'd had the audacity to exist while her son decided to humiliate someone for sport. The unfairness of it burned in my throat like acid. But arguing would accomplish nothing. People like Rebecca Ashford didn't lose arguments. They simply made you disappear. Security walked me to the service entrance like I might steal the silverware on my way out. The October night hit cold against my wine-soaked uniform, and I wrapped my arms around myself as I headed down the long driveway toward the street. Greenwich at 2 a.m. was silent, except for the sound of my footsteps and distant traffic on the post road. The bus stop sat 3 blocks away under a flickering streetlight. I sank onto the bench and pulled out my phone to check the schedule. Last bus had left 20 minutes ago. Next one wouldn't come until 5:30. 3.5 hours to sit here in wine-stained clothes, no money earned, and no way to cover even a fraction of what my mother needed. I pressed my palms against my eyes and tried not to cry, tried not to think about the hospital bill or the eviction notice I'd received last week, or the fact that my car registration had expired and I couldn't afford to renew it. Tried not to imagine my mother's face when I told her the treatment wasn't going to happen because I'd been humiliated by a drunk rich kid and couldn't even get paid for it. Headlights cut through the darkness. A black BMW sedan pulled up to the curb, sleek and expensive and completely out of place in this moment. The back window rolled down smoothly. Miss Evans. A man's voice, calm and professional. My employer would like to speak with you. If you'd be willing to come with me. Every warning I'd ever received about getting into cars with strangers screamed in my head. I stood up, took a step back. I don't know you. The back door opened, and a man emerged. Older, maybe early 40s, built solid and dressed in a suit that hadn't come off any rack I'd ever seen. He held up both hands in a placating gesture. My name is Franco Caruso. I work for Giovanni Moretti of Moretti Imports. We were guests at tonight's event. He reached into his jacket slowly, pulled out a business card and corporate ID. My employer witnessed what happened to you. He'd like to offer appropriate compensation. I stared at the ID. Looked legitimate enough, though I had no idea what legitimate corporate security identification actually looked like. Tell your employer thank you, but I'm fine. With respect, Miss Evans, you don't look fine. You look like you've had wine poured on you by a spoiled child, then been fired and cheated out of payment for work already performed. Franco's voice held genuine sympathy. Mr. Moretti simply wants to have a conversation. Public place, your choice of location if you prefer, but he asked me to extend this invitation personally. Something about the formality of it, the careful respect in Franco's demeanor, made me hesitate. What did I have to lose at this point? Where? A restaurant in Stamford. 20 minutes from here. I can have you back at this exact spot within 2 hours if the conversation doesn't go as hoped. My mother's face flashed through my mind. The way she'd looked last week when the oncologist told her the experimental treatment was her best shot. The hope in her eyes that I'd had to crush because we couldn't afford it. If anything feels wrong, I'm calling the police immediately. Franco inclined his head. Understood completely. After you. The drive took 18 minutes through empty streets. Franco didn't try to make conversation beyond pointing out that there was water in the cup holder if I needed it. The restaurant he pulled up to was dark. A small Italian place with elegant script on the windows announcing it as Rossini's. We're closed, I said. Mr. Moretti made arrangements. Franco came around to open my door. He values privacy for sensitive conversations. Inside smelled like garlic and fresh bread and something herbal I couldn't identify. A single table near the back had been set with 2 wine glasses and a bottle that remained unopened. A man stood as we entered, and I recognized him immediately, the one who'd been watching me from across the ballroom. the one who'd stood so still while everyone else performed. He was taller than I'd realized. Maybe 6'3", broad-shouldered, with dark hair swept back from a face that looked like it had been carved from stone and then softened just slightly by age. Dark brown eyes met mine with unsettling directness. The scar at his temple caught the light, a pale line against olive skin. "Miss Evans, thank you for agreeing to meet with me." His voice carried a faint accent I couldn't place. Italian, maybe, worn smooth by years in America. "Please, sit. Franco, that will be all." Franco disappeared somewhere toward the kitchen. I remained standing. "You arranged all this to talk to me about what happened tonight?" "I arranged this because what I witnessed was unacceptable." He gestured to the chair across from him. "And because I believe in compensation for injustice. Will you sit? I promise the wine remains unopened until you give permission." I thought the symbolism might be appreciated. Despite everything, a laugh escaped me. Exhausted and slightly hysterical, but genuine. I sat. Giovanni Moretti settled across from me and folded his hands on the table. No rings, no watch. Nothing ostentatious despite the clearly expensive suit. "You were owed $450 for your work this week. The Ashfords refused to pay you. I'd like to remedy that, plus offer $5,000 as compensation for the public humiliation you endured." My breath caught. $5,000. That was real money. That was nearly 2 months of my freelance income. Nobody offers that kind of money without wanting something in return. Astute. Something that might have been approval flickered in his expression. "I'm offering you employment. Legitimate work as a translator. I know you speak 5 languages fluently, that you have a degree in linguistics from Yale, and that your talent is currently being wasted serving wine to people who don't deserve to breathe the same air." The hair on the back of my neck rose. "How do you know that?" "I make it my business to know about people who interest me." He said it like it was the most natural thing in the world. Moretti Imports deals with suppliers and clients internationally. We need someone who can translate documents, handle negotiations with foreign contacts, bridge cultural gaps in business dealings. $6,000 a month, standard benefits, flexible hours so you can continue your freelance work if desired. $6,000 a month, $72,000 a year. That was more than double what I currently made. It was enough to cover rent and bills and still have money left over. It was salvation wrapped in an offer that made absolutely no sense. This is too good to be true. I kept my voice steady. "What's the catch?" "No catch, just expectations of professionalism and discretion." He paused, then added, "I should also mention that I've arranged for a donation to be made to Stamford Hospital, $50,000, allocated specifically to the oncology department for experimental cancer treatments. Anonymous, of course, but sufficient to cover a particular patient's needs." The world tilted. "How do you know about my mother?" "Like I said, I know about people who interest me." Giovanni leaned back slightly, and I noticed his hands never moved from the table, keeping them visible, non-threatening. "Sharon Evans, stage 3 ovarian cancer, being treated by Dr. Raymond Foster at Stamford Hospital. Treatment cost $180,000, insurance refusing coverage. You've been working 3 jobs trying to cover it." Terror and fury warred in my chest. This man had investigated me, knew details about my life that I'd shared with almost no one, had somehow arranged to pay for my mother's treatment before even speaking to me. Normal businessmen didn't do this. Normal businessmen didn't have the connections or resources to move that kind of money that quickly. I thought about the careful formality of Franco's approach. The closed restaurant arranged at 2 a.m, the way Giovanni sat with absolute stillness, comfortable with silence in a way that suggested he was used to people being afraid of him. He was offering me money and salvation, and all I had to do was ignore the obvious truth that I was sitting across from someone dangerous. "If I accept," I said slowly, "I need parameters. Nothing illegal. Nothing that compromises my integrity. If that's not acceptable, I'll walk away right now." Giovanni studied me for a long moment. Then he smiled, and it transformed his entire face, made him look younger, almost approachable. "You're either very brave or very desperate. I suspect both. Your parameters are acceptable. You translate documents and assist with international business negotiations. Nothing more. He extended his hand across the table. I looked at the calluses on his palm that didn't match his expensive suit, and understood that accepting this handshake would change everything. I took his hand. His grip was warm and firm and absolutely certain. "Welcome to Moretti Imports, Miss Evans." The Moretti Imports office sat in a converted warehouse building near the New Haven harbor, all exposed brick and polished concrete floors that echoed with every footstep. My first day, Franco gave me the tour with the casual pride of someone showing off something genuinely impressive. Modern workstations, state-of-the-art computers, a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Long Island Sound. Everything screamed legitimate international business. "Your desk," Franco announced, gesturing to a setup near the back with dual monitors and ergonomic everything. "Giovanni wants you comfortable. You'll be spending a lot of time here." He wasn't wrong. The first 2 weeks blurred together in a rhythm that felt almost normal. Documents arrived daily, shipping manifests from Rotterdam and Genoa, commercial invoices for wine imports and textiles, contracts with European suppliers that needed translation from Italian and Spanish. I cross-referenced terminology, ensured legal language matched across languages, and emailed finished work to Giovanni's assistant. The money appeared in my bank account like clockwork. $6,000 on the 15th. Rent suddenly wasn't terrifying. I could buy groceries without calculating every item. The hospital called to confirm my mother's treatment was fully funded and scheduled to begin next week. It should have felt like salvation. Instead, it felt like waiting, because I wasn't stupid, and the inconsistencies piled up like evidence I couldn't ignore. The meetings happened at impossible hours. I'd arrive at 8 in the morning to find Giovanni and his inner circle leaving the conference room, all of them looking like they'd been there for hours. Coffee cups everywhere, the air thick with cigarette smoke despite building regulations. Once, I came in at 7 and found them just starting, men in dark suits with weapons visible under their jackets. "Early shipment coordination," Franco explained when he caught me staring. "European time zones." Except I'd translated enough shipping documents to know that legitimate coordination happened via email and scheduled video calls, not closed-door meetings at dawn with armed men. The security was another tell. I'd worked in corporate offices before. Security guards were usually bored former cops counting down to retirement. These men moved like active military, scanning every entrance, hands always near concealed weapons. They knew tactics, formations, how to control a space. Then there were the conversations that stopped dead whenever I approached. Giovanni would be speaking rapid Italian with his captains, and the moment my footsteps echoed in the hallway, silence. When I entered with translated documents, they'd switched to English so bland it was obviously rehearsed. The shipment from Milan arrives Tuesday. Supplier confirmed pricing on the textiles. Never anything specific, never anything real. Franco became my unexpected ally in those first weeks, though I suspected even that was calculated. He started bringing me coffee in the mornings, asked about my mother's treatment, told stories about his own family in Providence. 26 years working for the Moretti family, he said with something like pride. Started as a driver, worked his way up. "Giovanni's a good boss," he said once, unprompted. "Loyal to people who are loyal to him. Remembers kindness, but he never forgets disrespect either." The warning was gentle but unmistakable. I researched late at night on my laptop, searching variations of Moretti Imports Connecticut and Moretti Family New Haven. The legitimate business existed, 40 years of official incorporation documents and tax filings. But buried in local news archives and true crime forums, I found the whispers. The Moretti family had controlled the New Haven port since the 1980s. Old Italian money, traditional structures, connections that ran from the docks to City Hall. Cosa Nostra. The American Mafia. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the search results and felt my stomach turn over. Giovanni Moretti wasn't just a businessman. He was a boss, and I was translating documents that probably laundered money, concealed illegal shipments, provided cover for whatever operations required international facade. I should have quit. Should have walked away while I still could. But my mother's first treatment was scheduled for Thursday, the experimental therapy that might save her life. $50,000 I didn't have, provided by a man who'd known exactly what pressure point to push. So I kept working, kept translating, kept pretending I didn't know what I was really doing. The third week, everything shattered. I was alone in the office past midnight, finishing a rush translation of shipping documents Giovanni needed for a morning meeting. Everyone else had left hours ago. The building silent except for distant sounds of the harbor and my keyboard clicking. Then voices filtered down the hallway. Low, urgent, angry. I froze, fingers hovering over keys. The conference room was supposed to be empty. I'd checked before settling in for the late shift. 3 dead. Giovanni's voice carried through the partially open door, cold with controlled rage. They hit the pickup at the warehouse, knew exactly when and where. Someone talked. The Albanians are getting bold. Another voice, older, speaking Italian. Bekim thinks he can take the territory by force. Let him think that. We hit back tomorrow night. Double force. Make it clear what happens when you touch Moretti operations. My blood turned to ice. Hit back. Double force. These weren't business negotiations. This was war. I needed to leave. Needed to get out before they realized I was here. Before I heard more than I could pretend to unhear. I closed my laptop as quietly as possible, gathered my bag with shaking hands. The floorboard creaked under my foot like a gunshot. Silence crashed through the building. Complete and absolute. Then footsteps, measured and deliberate, heading toward me. Giovanni appeared in the doorway of the conference room, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw the man beneath the careful civility. Eyes flat and assessing, body language predatory, everything about him radiating controlled violence. Hannah. My name sounded different in his mouth now. Not professional courtesy, something heavier. How long have you been here? I was finishing the shipping translations. I didn't mean to. My voice cracked. I should go. No. He moved forward and I stepped back instinctively, hit my desk. You heard. Not a question. I nodded, unable to force words past the terror closing my throat. He studied me for a long moment, something calculating happening behind those dark eyes. Come with me. It wasn't a request. I followed him to the conference room where 4 men sat around the table, all of them watching me with expressions ranging from suspicion to outright hostility. Franco stood against the wall, his face carefully neutral. Giovanni gestured for me to sit. I stayed standing. If I was about to die, I'd do it on my feet. You heard things you weren't meant to hear, Giovanni said calmly. Now we have a problem. You know too much to simply walk away. And given what's happening with our Albanian friends, letting you leave unprotected would be irresponsible. I won't tell anyone. The words tumbled out desperately. I'll forget everything I heard. I'll quit, disappear, whatever you want. That's not how this works. He leaned against the conference table, arms crossed. You have 2 options. First, you continue working here with full knowledge of what we do. Salary doubles to $12,000 a month. You and your mother receive our protection. Complete transparency. No more pretending. I stared at him. And the second option? Protective custody. Safe house. Isolated location. Full security. Until the territorial situation resolves. Could be weeks. Could be months. Your mother's treatment continues, but you'd be under guard. For your safety. The room spun slightly. Both options were cages, just different sizes. Those aren't really choices. No, he agreed with brutal honesty. They're not. You know what I am now? What we do? Pretending otherwise would be dangerous for everyone. But I'm giving you the option to choose how this goes forward. I thought about the past 3 weeks. How he'd paid for my mother's treatment before I'd even started working. How he'd offered employment instead of just handing me money. How Franco had become genuinely friendly. Protective even. Giovanni had multiple chances to hurt me, manipulate me, trap me completely. Instead, he'd given me choices, however limited. If I stay, I said slowly, I need parameters. I translate. I help with negotiations. But I don't participate in violence. I don't help plan whatever you're planning against the Albanians. I stay in my lane. Something that might have been respect flickered across Giovanni's face. Agreed. You're not being asked to become part of the organization. You're an asset, a valuable one. But you remain civilian in nature. Your skills, not your involvement. And my mother stays protected no matter what. You have my word. Franco had told me Giovanni never forgot loyalty, but he also never forgot disrespect. I was gambling everything that my usefulness outweighed the risk I represented. I extended my hand. Then I stay. Full transparency. No more pretending. Giovanni's handshake was firm. Final. Welcome to the real Moretti Imports, Hannah. Let's hope you don't regret this. I already did. But the treatment started Thursday, and my mother needed to live more than I needed to sleep at night with a clear conscience. Sometimes survival meant choosing the lesser evil. Sometimes it meant shaking hands with the devil and hoping he kept his promises. 4 weeks passed like water through fingers. November arrived with frost coating the New Haven harbor each morning. Ice forming along the edges of Long Island Sound. I settled into a rhythm that felt almost comfortable if I didn't think too hard about what I was actually doing. Translating documents for legitimate imports was easy. Wine from Tuscany, textiles from Milan, olive oil from Sicily. Real products with real paperwork that matched customs declarations. But then there were the other documents. The ones with codes embedded in product descriptions, shipment numbers that corresponded to nothing in the manifests, invoicing structures designed to move money through so many layers that tracing it would take forensic accountants months. I translated them all, told myself I was just doing my job. That knowing what the words meant didn't make me responsible for what happened after. The $12,000 a month helped with the rationalization. Giovanni needed me more than I'd anticipated. International suppliers didn't just need translation, they needed cultural navigation. The German distributor who considered directness a virtue, but Giovanni's bluntness an insult. The Japanese contact who required specifically yi, ritual courtesy, before any business could proceed. The French wine merchant who took offense at contract language I'd translated too literally. I became the bridge, not just between languages, but between worlds. It meant spending hours with Giovanni in his office, going over contracts line by line, explaining nuances that didn't survive direct translation. He'd lean over my shoulder to see the document, close enough that I could smell cedar and something darker, expensive cologne mixed with cigarette smoke. His hand would reach past mine to point at a clause, fingers brushing my wrist, and electricity would shoot up my arm. Professional distance became increasingly difficult to maintain. "Tell me about the inheritance," I said one evening. We were alone in his office, everyone else gone home hours ago. Outside, the harbor reflected city lights like scattered diamonds. How does someone end up running an organization like this at 24? Giovanni looked up from the contract he'd been reviewing, surprise flickering across his face. "You want to know my origin story? I want to understand who I'm working for." He set down his pen, leaned back in his chair. The leather creaked softly. My grandfather built this from nothing. Came from Naples in 1963 with $40 and a contact name. Started as muscle for the Genovese family operations in Connecticut. Worked his way up through loyalty and ruthlessness in equal measure. He spoke matter-of-factly, like discussing any family business. My father inherited in 1990. Good times for organized crime. The port was wide open. Everyone had their hand in something. Then the feds started cracking down. Cooperation agreements, RICO prosecutions. My father tried to pivot, move into more legitimate operations while maintaining the core business. What happened? Rival family didn't appreciate the expansion. The Albanians had just started moving into Connecticut, wanted the port access we controlled. They made an offer. My father refused. His jaw tightened. I was 23. Finishing business school at Columbia because my father insisted I have legitimate education. Got the call that my parents' car had been hit by a truck on I-95. Brake failure, they said. Tragic accident. The pain in his voice was carefully controlled, but unmistakable. "You knew it wasn't an accident." I knew. Everyone knew. But proving it? He shook his head. The Albanians backed off for 5 years after I took over. Gave me time to consolidate power, earn respect. Now they're back, and this time they're not asking politely. I studied his face in the dim office light. The scar at his temple, the lines around his eyes that came from constant vigilance. "Do you ever regret it? This life?" "Every day." The honesty surprised me. "But I'm responsible for 200 people now, families who depend on our operations for income, men who've given me their loyalty. I can't just walk away because I'm tired of looking over my shoulder. That's not the same as wanting to be here." "No, it's not." He met my eyes directly. "What about you? You're working for a criminal organization, Hannah. How do you justify that?" Fair question. I'd been asking myself the same thing for weeks. My mother worked 3 jobs to put me through school, cleaned offices at night, waited tables on weekends, did data entry during the day, never complained. Never made me feel like her exhaustion was my fault. My throat tightened. She gave me everything. Now she's dying, and I can finally give something back, even if it means compromising principles I thought were absolute. Giovanni's expression softened. Love makes us do complicated things. So does loyalty. We held each other's gaze for a moment too long. Something hummed in the air between us, tension that had been building for weeks. I became acutely aware of how alone we were, how close, how easy it would be to close the distance. I looked away first. "I should get home. Early meeting tomorrow with the Milan suppliers. Franco will drive you. I can take the bus." "You can." Giovanni stood, came around the desk. "But you won't. Not anymore." The Albanian situation had escalated noticeably over the past 2 weeks. A shipment of legitimate wine imports had been intercepted at the port, the contents destroyed. 2 warehouses in New Haven burned in suspicious fires that the fire marshal labeled arson. One of Giovanni's captains had his car firebombed in broad daylight. Security increased across all operations. More men, more weapons, more paranoia. I'd gained 2 shadows. 2 guards who followed me everywhere with professional discretion. To the grocery store, to visit my mother, to my apartment. Always 20 feet back, never intrusive, but absolutely present. "Is this really necessary?" I'd asked Franco when he first introduced them. "Boss's orders. You're valuable now. That makes you a target. Valuable. Not safe. Not protected out of kindness. Valuable. Like any other asset." My mother noticed immediately when I visited Stamford Hospital for her second treatment session. The guards waited in the lobby, visible enough to be concerning. "Hannah." She caught my hand as I adjusted her IV line. "What's going on?" "Who are those men?" "Security. My employer is very safety conscious." "Your employer." Sharon Evans looked at me with eyes that had seen through my lies since I was 5 years old. "The one who's paying for all this?" She gestured at the private room, the experimental medications, the country's top oncologist, who'd somehow found time in his schedule for a charity case from Connecticut. "Yes." "And he requires you to have armed guards?" I couldn't lie to her. "Not about this." "It's complicated, Mom." "Is it dangerous?" "More than I wanted to admit." "I'm being careful." "That's not what I asked." I sat on the edge of her bed, held her hand. It felt smaller than I remembered, fragile. The work itself isn't dangerous. But there are people who might want to hurt my employer. Having me watched is a precaution. You're working for criminals. Not a question. I'm working for someone who can afford to save your life. My voice cracked. I know it's not ideal. I know it's not what you wanted for me. But Mom, the treatment is working. Dr. Foster says the tumor has shrunk 15%. 15% in 3 weeks. Tears welled in her eyes. Oh, baby. I never wanted you to compromise yourself for me. You spent 27 years compromising yourself for me. Let me return the favor. She pulled me into a hug, and I felt her shoulders shake. Promise me you'll be smart. Promise me you'll get out if it becomes too dangerous. I promised. Another lie, because we both knew I wouldn't leave while she needed treatment. While Giovanni held that particular card, I was trapped as surely as if I'd signed a contract in blood. But trapped didn't mean helpless, and valuable meant I had leverage of my own. If I was going to survive in Giovanni Moretti's world, I needed to stop thinking like a victim and start thinking like a player. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, it felt like the first honest acknowledgement I'd made in weeks. I was in this. Completely, irreversibly in this. Time to stop pretending otherwise and figure out how to play the game without losing myself entirely. Giovanni was right about one thing. Love and loyalty made us do complicated things. I just hoped they wouldn't end up getting me killed. The oncologist's office smelled like antiseptic and false hope. Dr. Foster reviewed my mother's latest scans with the careful optimism of someone who'd learned not to promise miracles. But the numbers didn't lie. 23% reduction in tumor size. Blood markers improving. Her color had returned, the gray pallor of illness giving way to something that looked almost like health. She's responding better than I dared hope, Dr. Foster said, adjusting his glasses. If this trajectory continues, we might be looking at full remission within 6 months. 6 months. My mother might live because I'd shaken hands with the devil and agreed to translate his sins into proper English. The consultation ran longer than expected, nearly 2 hours of detailed discussions about medication adjustments and upcoming scans. When we finally left, the November sun had already started its descent toward the horizon, casting Stamford Hospital in shades of amber and shadow. 7 in the evening, the parking lot half empty, most visitors already gone home to their safe, uncomplicated lives. Franco walked 5 feet ahead, his posture relaxed but alert. Behind me, Marcus and Tony maintained their usual distance, close enough to respond to threats, but far enough to provide the illusion of privacy. I'd learned their names over the past few weeks, their histories. Marcus had 3 kids and coached Little League. Tony sent money back to his family in Naples every month. They weren't just guards. They were people doing a job, protecting an asset, following orders. The parking garage connected to the hospital through a covered walkway, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. My footsteps echoed against concrete as we descended to level 3 where Franco had parked the SUV. I didn't see them until it was too late. 3 black vans exploded into motion from different sections of the garage, engines roaring, tires shrieking against concrete. They converged on us from 3 angles simultaneously, a coordinated attack that spoke of planning and reconnaissance. Franco reacted instantly. "Get down!" He shoved me behind a concrete pillar as gunfire erupted. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. Nothing like movies made it seem. Muzzle flashes lit up the garage in strobe light bursts. Bullets sparked off concrete, shattered car windows, punched through metal with sickening thuds. Marcus returned fire, his weapon appearing in his hand like magic. Tony positioned himself between me and the nearest van, his body a deliberate shield. Franco barked orders in Italian, coordinating defensive positions while simultaneously calling for backup on his phone. 8 men poured from the vans. I caught glimpses of them between gunfire, faces covered with black masks, movements efficient and military precise. Albanian, I realized, with ice flooding my veins. This was Bakim Hoksha's response to Giovanni's operations, and I was the target. "We need to move." Franco grabbed my arm, pulling me toward a row of parked cars. "Stay low. Stay behind me." We ran in a crouch, using vehicles as cover. Glass exploded above my head. I felt the heat of a bullet pass close enough to stir my hair. Terror locked my throat, made breathing impossible. This wasn't supposed to happen. This was a hospital parking garage. Normal people came here for healing, for hope, not to get caught in Mafia warfare. The attackers were shouting to each other in Albanian, coordinating, flanking. My brain automatically processed their language even through the panic. Second team south entrance. Cut off escape. Alive. Boss wants her alive. They wanted to take me. Use me as leverage against Giovanni. I'd be the perfect hostage, someone he'd invested in, someone with just enough value to make him negotiate. Franco fired 3 quick shots, dropped 1 attacker. "Marcus, cover left." But there were too many of them, and they kept coming. Professional, relentless, willing to die to complete their objective. Then I heard it. The commander of the Albanian team, speaking rapid instructions to the flanking squad. "South stairwell. 2 men. Box them in." Franco and the others couldn't understand Albanian. They were about to walk into an ambush. "Franco!" I grabbed his jacket, pulling him back. "South entrance. 2 more coming from behind, they're trying to trap us." He stared at me for half a second, processing. Then his eyes widened with understanding. "You speak Albanian?" "Enough. They want me alive. Boss's orders." "Shit." He shouted to Marcus and Tony, "Hostiles flanking south. Reposition." The warning saved us. Marcus spun as two armed men emerged from the stairwell. Got his shots off first. One attacker dropped. The other dove behind a truck, pinned down. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called the police. The Albanians would have minutes at most before law enforcement swarmed the garage. Their commander shouted orders. "Fall back! Mission abort!" They retreated as quickly as they'd come, dragging their wounded, leaving behind shattered glass and the acrid smell of gunpowder. Engines roared. The vans peeled out of the garage with reckless speed, disappearing into Stamford traffic. Silence crashed down like a physical weight. My ears rang from the gunfire. My hands shook so violently I had to clench them into fists. Marcus was bleeding from his shoulder, Tony from a graze across his ribs. Franco looked untouched but furious, phone pressed to his ear. "We were hit at Stamford Hospital." He snapped into the phone. 8 hostiles. Coordinated attack. "Hannah's fine. Get the boss here now." I sank down against a car tire, legs refusing to hold me anymore. I'd almost died. Would have died or worse without Franco's training. Without Marcus and Tony willing to put their bodies between me and bullets. This wasn't abstract anymore. This wasn't documents and translations and careful moral distance. This was real. Visceral. The life I'd chosen had teeth, and they'd just tried to close around my throat. Giovanni arrived before the police finished securing the scene. I don't know how he managed it, what strings he pulled or what connections he activated, but suddenly he was there. Striding across the parking garage in an immaculate black suit that looked absurdly out of place among the bullet casings and broken glass, his face a mask of cold fury that made everyone in his path step aside. He found me still sitting against the car. Franco crouched next to me doing a medical assessment I didn't need. I wasn't hurt. Not physically. But my hands wouldn't stop shaking and breathing felt like sucking air through concrete. Giovanni dropped to his knees in front of me, hands framing my face with surprising gentleness. His eyes scanned me frantically, looking for injuries, blood. "Anything wrong? Are you hurt?" I shook my head mutely. "Look at me, Hannah. Are you hurt?" "No. I'm fine." They didn't touch me. My voice sounded strange, distant, like someone else was speaking. His hands were shaking. Giovanni Moretti, the man who'd built an empire on controlled violence and calculated intimidation, was shaking. Cristo Santo. When Franco called, he cut himself off, jaw clenching. "You shouldn't have been exposed like this. This is my fault." "She saved our asses," Franco said quietly. "Heard them coordinating in Albanian. Warned us about the flanking squad. We'd be dead without her." Giovanni's eyes snapped to me. "You speak Albanian." "I studied it in college. For diplomatic translation work." The absurdity of discussing my language education while sitting in a crime scene almost made me laugh. Didn't seem relevant until they started trying to kidnap me. He pulled me against his chest suddenly, one arm around my shoulders, the other hand cradling the back of my head. I felt his heart hammering against my cheek, felt the tension vibrating through every muscle. He held me like I might disappear if he let go. "I almost lost you," he said into my hair, voice rough. I thought, Cristo, Hannah. I can't. I wrapped my arms around him, anchored myself in his solid warmth. He smelled like cedar and smoke and something indefinably him. Safe, despite everything. Safe because he'd moved heaven and earth to get here. Because the thought of losing me had stripped away every layer of careful control. Police approached, asking questions. Giovanni released me reluctantly, stood and became the businessman again. Smooth, cooperative, explaining that his employee had been targeted by rivals attempting to damage his import business. He had lawyers arriving, statements prepared, everything necessary to spin this into something the police could file away without digging too deeply. Because this was how his world worked. Violence contained, consequences managed, truth buried under layers of legitimate-seeming explanation. But in the back of the ambulance where paramedics insisted on checking me for shock, with Giovanni's hand wrapped around mine like a lifeline he couldn't release, I understood something fundamental had shifted. He cared, not as a boss protecting an asset, not as a criminal maintaining control over a useful resource. He cared about me specifically, personally, deeply enough that nearly losing me had cracked his careful facade, and terrifyingly, I cared back. "We need to talk," I said quietly, meeting his eyes. "After this. About what this means." "Yeah." His thumb traced circles on my palm, absent and intimate. "We do." The truth neither of us wanted to acknowledge hung between us, heavy with implications and danger, and a future far more complicated than either of us had planned. But there it was, undeniable, inescapable. This wasn't just about work anymore. It never really had been. We kissed in the back of Giovanni's car, 20 minutes after nearly dying in a hospital parking garage. Not gentle or exploratory, desperate and urgent, months of tension igniting like gasoline meeting flame. His hand cupped the back of my neck, pulling me closer, and I tasted fear and relief and something darker on his lips. "This is a terrible idea," I murmured against his mouth. "Worst decision you'll ever make." He kissed me again, deeper. "I should stop." "Don't." My fingers twisted in his shirt. "Don't you dare stop." But he did, pulled back with visible effort, resting his forehead against mine. "You deserve better than this, better than me. Someone who can offer you a normal life, safety, a future that doesn't involve armed guards and enemies who want to use you as leverage." "I don't want normal." I met his dark eyes directly. "I want you, with all the complications that entails." Something shifted in his expression, relief mixed with resignation. "Then you have me. Christo, help us both." The relationship changed everything. Not just between us, but within the entire operation. I wasn't Giovanni's translator anymore. I was his partner, his advisor, someone whose opinion carried weight in rooms where women traditionally didn't speak. The transformation happened gradually over the following weeks. Giovanni started including me in strategic meetings, asking my perspective on approaches that violence alone couldn't solve. His captains initially bristled at my presence, but Franco set the tone. "She saved our lives," he told them flatly during one tense discussion. "Spotted the ambush when we couldn't. She's earned her place at this table." The Albanian situation required more than bullets. I'd been thinking about it since the attack, turning over possibilities while translating invoices and reviewing shipping manifests. "We need legal pressure," I said during a meeting 3 days after the parking garage incident. "Bakim's organization traffics people and weapons. That's federal jurisdiction. If we can provide the FBI with enough evidence to move against his operations, we solve the problem without starting a war that brings attention to everyone." Giovanni's lieutenant, a hard man named Vincent, scoffed. "You want us to cooperate with the feds? That's suicide. Anonymous tips aren't cooperation." I pulled out my laptop, opened files I'd been compiling. I still have contacts from my previous work translating for UN diplomats. One of them is now a federal prosecutor specializing in human trafficking cases. If certain information about Albanian operations reached her desk through untraceable channels, she'd have to act on it. Giovanni leaned forward, studying the documentation. "You've already prepared this. I don't suggest strategies I haven't thought through." He smiled, something warm and proud in his expression. "What kind of information are we talking about?" "Shipment schedules, warehouse locations, personnel names. Nothing that connects to Moretti operations, but everything needed to dismantle Bakim's trafficking network." I met his eyes. "I won't help plan violence, Giovanni. But I can help apply pressure through legal channels that accomplishes the same goal." The room fell silent. His captains waited for Giovanni's reaction, testing whether he'd allow a woman, an outsider, to dictate strategy. "Do it," he said finally. "Coordinate with Franco. Get him everything he needs to pass information without creating trails back to us." Vincent opened his mouth to object. Giovanni's look silenced him. That night, in Giovanni's penthouse overlooking New Haven Harbor, I established boundaries that would define our relationship going forward. "I won't participate in decisions about violence," I said, curled against his side on the leather couch. His arm around my shoulders felt like safety and danger combined. "I'll help with strategy, negotiations, legitimate business expansion, but planning hits, coordinating retaliation, that's your world, not mine. I wouldn't ask you to compromise your principles." His fingers traced patterns on my arm. "You're valuable precisely because you think differently than we do. See solutions we miss because we've been conditioned to solve problems with force. You're okay with me drawing lines? Hannah. He tilted my chin up, made me look at him. You're the first person in 10 years who's told me no about anything and lived to discuss it further. Your boundaries aren't just okay. They're necessary. They keep me human. I kissed him. Soft and lingering. What happens when your world and my boundaries collide? Then we figure it out together. His voice held certainty I didn't feel. One problem at a time. The Ashfords reappeared like a bad memory resurfacing. Tyler called my personal cell, a number he shouldn't have had, with the desperate aggression of someone drowning financially. I know who you work for, he said without preamble. Giovanni Moretti. Organized crime, money laundering, probably worse. I have evidence. Photos of you entering his office building. Documentation of his business dealings that won't hold up to federal scrutiny. My blood ran cold. What do you want? $500,000. Cash. Or I take everything to the FBI and make sure they understand you're not just an employee, you're complicit. I could have told Giovanni. He would have handled it efficiently and permanently, but Tyler Ashford was my ghost, my humiliation, my problem. I'd solve it my way. I spent 3 days working contacts I'd made during my previous career. Journalists, legal researchers, people who owed me favors or simply believed in justice. Tyler Ashford wasn't careful. His social media showed a lifestyle far beyond legitimate income. His LLC had irregularities visible to anyone who looked closely. My break came from a reporter at the Hartford Courant I'd helped with translation work on a corruption investigation 2 years prior. She'd been looking into zoning fraud in Greenwich when Tyler's name surfaced. He's dirty, she told me over coffee in Stamford. Bribed city officials, manipulated permits, defrauded investors. I have recordings from a whistleblower. Everything needed to bring charges, but my editor won't publish without additional corroboration. What if I could get you his financial records? Proof of money laundering through his development deals. Her eyes sharpened. I'd have front-page material. Why are you helping? He tried to extort someone I care about. I believe in consequences delivered through appropriate channels. I met her gaze steadily. Get him legally. Make it public. End his ability to hurt anyone else. She agreed. I provided financial documentation obtained through methods I didn't examine too closely, courtesy of Franco's connections. 3 days later, Tyler's world exploded. I arranged a meeting at a restaurant in Greenwich Neutral Territory. Rebecca and Tyler arrived looking hunted. The gloss of wealth stripped away by legal pressure and mounting debt. Rebecca's designer suit couldn't hide desperation. Tyler's forced bravado cracked before we even ordered drinks. You did this, Rebecca hissed across the table. Destroyed us. Over what? Hurt feelings? I set a folder on the table between us. This contains additional evidence about your tax fraud, your son's corruption charges, and several other irregularities that haven't reached prosecutors yet. If they do, you're both looking at federal prison. Tyler's face drained of color. This is blackmail. It's leverage. The same thing you tried using on me. I kept my voice calm, conversational. Here's what happens now. You disappear from my life completely. No more contact. No more threats. No more attempts to involve law enforcement in matters you don't understand. In exchange, this evidence gets filed away and forgotten. Rebecca's hands trembled as she opened the folder, scanned the documents. You're working for criminals. You're no different than us now. That's where you're wrong. I leaned forward slightly. The difference is I don't humiliate people for entertainment. I don't use power to crush those weaker than me. I don't hide cowardice behind a family name. I stood, gathering my coat. You had every advantage. You squandered it being cruel. Now face the consequences with whatever dignity you can scrape together. Rebecca tried to maintain her superior expression, but it crumbled at the edges. Tyler looked like he might cry. They'd lost. And they knew it. Not to violence or intimidation, but to someone who'd learned to use the same weapons they'd wielded their entire lives. Information, leverage, pressure applied through proper channels. Stay away from me, I said quietly. Stay away from Giovanni. Rebuild your lives somewhere far from Connecticut, and maybe you'll survive what you've brought on yourselves. I walked out without waiting for their response, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The girl who'd stood silent while wine soaked her hair was gone. In her place was someone who'd learned that power came in many forms, and the most effective weren't always the most violent. Giovanni waited in the car outside, Franco at the wheel. He studied my face as I slid into the back seat. How'd it go? They'll disappear. Legally neutralized. No bodies. No mess. I buckled my seatbelt. Problem solved my way. He pulled me against his side, kissed the top of my head. You're terrifying. I mean that as a compliment. I learned from the best. I laced my fingers through his. Now let's go home. I'm exhausted. And your world is complicated enough without the Ashfords adding to it. The city lights blurred past the window as Franco drove us back to New Haven. I'd crossed lines I never thought I'd cross, made compromises that would have horrified me 6 weeks ago. But I'd done it maintaining my own code, keeping boundaries that mattered. Giovanni's world was mine now, for better or worse, and I was learning to navigate it without losing myself entirely. That had to be enough. The FBI raid on Bakim Hakshaw's trafficking operation made national news. 3 warehouses in Bridgeport, 17 arrests, 26 victims recovered, including 8 minors. The federal prosecutor I'd contacted didn't ask where the anonymous tip came from. She didn't need to. The evidence was airtight, documentation so detailed it practically wrote the indictments itself. Giovanni watched the news coverage in his office, expression unreadable. You did this. We did this. I sat on the edge of his desk. Legal pressure instead of a body count. The Albanians just lost their most profitable operation and face federal scrutiny they can't afford. Bakim will retaliate. Or he'll negotiate. I pulled up the message that had arrived that morning, translated from Albanian. He wants a meeting, neutral territory. Says continued war benefits no one when the feds are already watching. Franco appeared in the doorway. It's a trap. Has to be. Maybe. Giovanni studied the message. Or maybe he's pragmatic enough to recognize when he's lost leverage. Hannah destroyed his trafficking network. That was 60% of his income. He can't sustain a territorial war and rebuild simultaneously. The meeting was set for a private club in Providence, Rhode Island. Halfway between New Haven and Bakim's base in Boston, neutral ground where neither organization held advantages. I insisted on accompanying Giovanni, despite every objection from his captains. He requested a translator, I argued. His English is functional, but not business fluent. You need me there to catch nuances, ensure nothing gets lost in translation. You're also a visible vulnerability, Vincent said bluntly. They tried to kidnap you once already. Which is exactly why she comes. Giovanni's voice carried finality. Bakim needs to see that Hannah isn't my weakness. She's my advantage. That changes the calculation. The drive took 90 minutes through December cold. 3 SUVs traveling in formation. I sat beside Giovanni in the middle vehicle, Franco driving, tension thick enough to taste. Giovanni held my hand the entire drive, thumb tracing circles on my palm. Nervous habit I'd learned to recognize. If this goes bad, he said quietly, Franco has orders to get you out first. Don't argue. Don't fight him. Just go. Nothing's going bad. I squeezed his fingers. We're negotiating from strength. Bakim knows it. That's why he agreed to meet. The club was old money personified. Wood paneling and leather chairs and oil paintings of dead industrialists. A private dining room had been arranged. 1 table, 8 chairs, security stationed outside. Bakim arrived with 3 men, all of them radiating controlled violence despite formal attire. Bakim Hakshaw was older than I expected, maybe 55, with silver threading through dark hair and eyes that assessed threats with practiced efficiency. He looked at me the way someone might examine an unexpected complication. You bring woman to business meeting? He directed the question at Giovanni in accented English. I bring my translator and strategic advisor. Giovanni pulled out my chair personally, a deliberate statement. Hannah Evans. She speaks Albanian fluently, among other languages. Something flickered in Bakim's expression. Calculation. Convenient. The negotiations started professionally. Territory divisions, port access schedules, agreed upon boundaries for different operations. Giovanni proposed something revolutionary. specialization based on efficiency rather than violence. The Albanians could operate in specific territories without interference from Moretti, but they'd avoid residential areas that attracted federal attention. In exchange, Moretti maintained exclusive control of legitimate port operations and major shipping routes. It was almost working, almost civilized. Then Bakim's lieutenant said something in Albanian to his boss, low and presumably private. The Italian is weak, letting a woman speak for him like trained dog. I kept my expression neutral, continued taking notes. Let them think I didn't understand. Bakim responded in the same language, voice carrying contempt. All men become weak eventually. This one lets prostitute advise him on business. We agree to terms, then crush him when opportunity comes. Giovanni glanced at me, caught the slight tension in my shoulders. He didn't speak Albanian, but he knew me well enough to read the signs. I set down my pen carefully, looked directly at Bakim, and spoke in flawless Albanian. The prostitute you refer to is the one who provided federal prosecutors with detailed evidence of your trafficking operations. Warehouse locations, shipment schedules, personnel files. Everything needed to dismantle 60% of your income and put 17 of your men in federal custody. The room went absolutely silent. Bakim's face drained of color. His men reached for weapons instinctively before his raised hand stopped them. I continued in Albanian, voice conversational. I also know about your secondary operation in Hartford, the money laundering through construction companies, the weapons cache in Waterbury, your Lieutenant Victor's side business selling information to your competitors. Shall I continue? Or would you prefer to discuss this agreement in good faith? Giovanni remained perfectly still beside me, but I felt satisfaction radiating from him. Franco had positioned himself behind Bakim's men, ready to move if needed. Bakim studied me for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he laughed, low and genuine. You are not weakness. You are weapon. I'm a translator who pays attention. I switched back to English. The question is whether we continue this conversation honestly or waste everyone's time with posturing. He leaned back, reassessing everything. The terms your boss proposes. They are fair? Fairer than war, that brings federal attention neither of us can afford. You lost trafficking operations. Giovanni could press advantage, destroy you completely. Instead, he's offering coexistence with clear boundaries. Take the deal. Rebuild your organization within agreed parameters, and everyone profits. Or refuse, and I ensure federal investigators receive very interesting information about your remaining operations. It was a bluff, partially. I didn't have much more than what I'd already provided prosecutors. But Bakim didn't know that. He spoke to Giovanni directly. You let her threaten me in my own language. I let her do her job. Giovanni's voice carried quiet confidence. Hannah operates on different battlefield than we do. Information, legal pressure, strategic thinking that doesn't require bullets. That's why she's valuable. Why she'll always be protected. The power dynamic had shifted completely. I wasn't the weak point Bakim could exploit. I was the reason attacking Giovanni had become exponentially more dangerous. Agreed. Bakim extended his hand across the table. Territory division as proposed. No interference in agreed boundaries. Peace. Giovanni shook it firmly. Peace, with clear understanding that violations have consequences. Understood. Bakim's eyes moved to me. You are unusual woman. Most would not survive this world. Most wouldn't choose it. I met his gaze steadily. I'm here for my own reasons. All I ask is respect for boundaries and intelligence not to force my hand. We left Providence with a treaty. Fragile but functional. In the SUV heading back to New Haven, Giovanni pulled me against his side and laughed with relief. You terrified him. A 55-year-old Albanian crime lord. And you made him blink first. I told the truth. Sometimes that's more frightening than violence. Franco caught my eye in the rearview mirror. Boss is right. You're terrifying. Remind me never to piss you off. The peace held for 3 days before Franco's informant reported Albanian rogue elements planning ambush. Men loyal to Victor, Bakim's lieutenant, who didn't accept the agreement. They wanted blood, wanted Giovanni dead regardless of consequences. Franco's team intercepted them before they reached New Haven. 5 men captured, their weapons confiscated, their plan dismantled before execution. Giovanni made a call to Bekim, explained the situation with cold precision. Your men violated the agreement. This is your problem to handle. Bekim executed Victor and the conspirators personally. Sent proof to Giovanni to demonstrate commitment to peace. It was brutal, final, and exactly the message needed. The treaty would hold because both sides understood the alternative was mutually destructive. I watched the city lights from Giovanni's penthouse that night, processing how far I'd come from the woman who'd served wine to cruel socialites. I'd helped broker peace between criminal organizations, used intelligence and language skills to prevent war, become someone feared and respected in a world I'd never imagined entering. Regrets? Giovanni asked, coming up behind me and wrapping his arms around my waist. Every day, I leaned back against his chest, but not about this. About us. Not anymore. Good. He kissed my temple. Because you're stuck with me now. Can't let you go when you're this dangerous. I turned in his arms, smiled up at him. Who says I want to leave? Smart woman. We kissed as the city sparkled below. Two people who'd found each other through blood and chaos and somehow built something real from impossible circumstances. The war was over. The peace was fragile. And somewhere in the complexity of it all, I'd found exactly where I belonged. 3 months and 2 weeks after the Providence meeting, winter settled over Connecticut with the kind of cold that made your bones ache. March arrived carrying the promise of spring, but delivering nothing except gray skies and ice that refused to melt. I sat in my new office on the top floor of the Moretti Enterprises building, reviewing quarterly reports for our legitimate operations, and tried to remember the woman who'd served wine at the Ashford mansion. She felt like someone from another lifetime. The nameplate on my desk read, Hannah Evans, Chief Operating Officer. The title still felt surreal some mornings, but the work was real enough. Expanding wine imports, negotiating textile contracts, managing logistics for legitimate shipping operations. Giovanni had been serious about diversifying the business portfolio, investing profits from his less legal enterprises into ventures that could withstand federal scrutiny. My salary was $150,000 a year now, plus benefits and equity. I had my own apartment in downtown New Haven, though I spent most nights at Giovanni's penthouse anyway. My mother's medical bills were paid in full. The experimental treatment had worked beyond anyone's expectations. Sharon Evans was in complete remission. Dr. Foster called it miraculous. I called it the most expensive bargain I'd ever made with fate. My mother knew the truth now, had known for weeks. I'd finally told her everything over dinner at her newly renovated apartment, the one Giovanni had insisted on providing when she was discharged from treatment. You're working for the Mafia, she'd said. Not a question, but a statement requiring acknowledgement. I'm working for Giovanni Moretti, who happens to run criminal operations alongside legitimate business interests. Yes, and you're in love with him. That had been harder to admit. Yes. She'd been quiet for a long time, studying me with eyes that had seen me through childhood's scraped knees and teenage heartbreak. Are you happy? The question surprised me. As happy as I can be in this situation. Then I suppose that's all I can ask for. She'd taken my hand across the table. Just promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you won't lose yourself completely in his world. I'd promised, though we both knew the lines I'd drawn were already blurrier than I'd ever intended. A knock on my office door pulled me from the memory. Franco entered carrying coffee and wearing his usual expression of paternal concern. He'd become something like family over the past months, protective and loyal in ways that made me understand why Giovanni trusted him absolutely. Boss wants you in the conference room, he said, setting the coffee on my desk. Supplier meeting in 20 minutes. The Germans are being difficult again about contract terms. They're always difficult. I saved the spreadsheet and grabbed my tablet. Let me guess, they want shorter payment windows and longer delivery timelines. How'd you know? Because efficiency is a German virtue, but so is risk aversion. They want us to absorb all the uncertainty while they maintain maximum flexibility. Franco grinned. This is why you're the COO and I'm just the guy who shoots people. You're way more than that. I bumped his shoulder as we walked toward the conference room. You're the guy who shoots people and makes excellent coffee. The meeting went exactly as predicted. 3 hours of negotiation conducted in a mixture of English and German. Me translating not just words, but cultural expectations. Giovanni understanding instinctively when to push and when to compromise. We emerged with terms favorable to both sides. Another contract secured that generated legitimate income and strengthened our international reputation. "You're terrifying in negotiations," Giovanni said afterward, alone in his office. "The German supplier called you Die Eiserne Frau, the Iron Woman, better than what Bekim called me." He pulled me into his lap, arms circling my waist. "What did Bekim call you?" Albanian has very colorful vocabulary for dangerous women. Most of it isn't translatable in polite company. I kissed him softly. But it amounted to respect, which was the point. Respect. Giovanni's hand traced up my spine. "You've earned that from everyone in the organization. Franco's ready to adopt you. Vincent actually smiled at one of your suggestions last week. That's unprecedented. I'm still an outsider." "No." His voice carried absolute certainty. "You're family now. My family." That means something in this world. The weight of that statement settled over me. Family in Giovanni's world meant protection, loyalty, and obligations that ran deeper than legal contracts. It meant I was part of something larger and more complicated than I'd ever imagined joining. My phone buzzed with a reminder. "We have that corporate networking event tonight. Stamford Convention Center." Giovanni groaned. "Do we have to attend? Those things are torture." "You wanted more legitimate business presence. This is how that works. Schmoozing with other business owners, making connections, pretending to care about quarterly earnings. I'd rather negotiate with armed Albanians. At least there's an open bar." I stood, smoothing my skirt, "and I promise to make it worth your while afterward." His eyes darkened with promise. "I'll hold you to that." The convention center buzzed with the particular energy of professional networking events. Business owners and executives circulated through the space, exchanging cards and forced laughter, performing capitalism with rehearsed enthusiasm. Giovanni wore his businessman persona like armor, charming and professional. No hint of the dangerous man beneath the expensive suit. We worked the room efficiently, discussing import logistics with potential clients, building relationships that would benefit our expanding legitimate operations. I was in the middle of explaining our textile sourcing to a boutique owner when I saw her. Rebecca Ashford stood near the catering table, wearing a simple black dress that looked off the rack rather than designer. Her hair was different, less severe, and she'd aged in the month since I'd last seen her. She was serving hors d'oeuvres to guests, a name tag identifying her as staff for the catering company. Our eyes met across the room. Recognition flared in her expression, followed immediately by shame. She looked away quickly, busying herself with arranging napkins that didn't need arranging. I excused myself from the conversation and crossed to the catering table. Rebecca tensed as I approached, but didn't flee. "Rebecca." I kept my voice neutral. "Miss Evans." She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Would you care for any appetizers?" The role reversal was so complete it felt surreal. I picked up a small plate, selected a few items I didn't actually want. "How have you been?" "Does it matter?" Her voice was barely audible. "Honestly? No." I kept my tone conversational rather than cruel. "But I'm asking anyway." She finally looked at me, and I saw genuine brokenness there. We lost everything. The house, the company, the reputation. Tyler's in federal prison for 3 years. I work events like this now to make rent on a studio apartment in Bridgeport. I'm sorry it came to that. "Are you?" Bitterness crept into her voice. "You destroyed us. You destroyed yourselves." I set down the plate. I just ensured there were consequences for cruelty, fraud, and corruption. What happened after was your own doing. Rebecca blinked rapidly, fighting tears. I never thought it would end like this. We were untouchable. No one's untouchable. That's what you never understood. I felt Giovanni's presence behind me before he spoke, his hand settling at the small of my back. People like you think wealth protects you from consequences. It doesn't. It just delays them. Rebecca looked between us, understanding finally dawning. You two deserve each other. Both of you made from the same cold calculation. Maybe. I met her eyes directly, but neither of us would pour wine on someone for entertainment. Remember that the next time you serve appetizers to people who don't see you as human. I walked away, without waiting for her response. Giovanni beside me. We left the event early, drove back to his penthouse in comfortable silence. The confrontation with Rebecca should have felt victorious, but it just felt sad. Necessary, but sad. The penthouse windows overlooked New Haven Harbor, city lights reflecting on dark water like scattered stars. I kicked off my heels and collapsed onto the leather couch, exhausted from performing normalcy all evening. Giovanni loosened his tie, poured 2 glasses of wine, and joined me. That was harder than I expected, I admitted. Seeing her brought it full circle. He handed me a glass. The woman who humiliated you is now serving appetizers at corporate events while you negotiate million-dollar contracts. Poetic justice. Is it justice, or just more cruelty with better justification? Giovanni studied me seriously. You showed her mercy by walking away. You could have destroyed her further, made tonight impossible. Instead, you acknowledged her humanity even when she denied yours. That's not cruelty, Hannah. That's grace. I sipped the wine, let his words settle. You've changed too. The Giovanni I met wouldn't have framed it that way. That's because the Giovanni you met was trying very hard not to care about anything beyond survival and power. He set down his glass, pulled me against his side. Then you opened my door looking for help and somehow convinced me that there was more to protect than territory and reputation. Your door. I was the one looking for help that night. No. I watched you maintain dignity while covered in wine, watched you continue working despite humiliation. And I opened a door I'd kept closed for 10 years. His fingers traced patterns on my shoulder. You saved me as much as I saved you. We sat in comfortable silence, the weight of the past months settling around us. The violence, the negotiations, the moral compromises and hard-won victories. We'd built something real from impossible circumstances. 2 people who'd found each other through blood and chaos and somehow made it work. I should check tomorrow's schedule, I said, not moving. Early meeting with the Milan suppliers about that delayed shipment. Franco can handle it. I should still review the documentation. Hannah. Giovanni tilted my chin up, made me look at him. The work will be there tomorrow. Right now, just be here. With me. I kissed him, soft and lingering. Where else would I be? Anywhere safer. Anywhere more normal. Anywhere that didn't involve armed guards and criminal organizations and constant moral complexity. Probably. I settled more comfortably against him. But I chose this. Chose you. Chose the messy, complicated, dangerous reality of our life together. I'm not leaving. Good. His arms tightened around me. Because I'm not letting you go. Through the windows, I could see Franco and 2 other guards positioned on the terrace, discreet but ever present. Security was still necessary, would probably always be necessary. The peace with the Albanians held, but Giovanni's world would never be completely safe. That was part of the bargain. But looking at the life we'd built, the legitimate business expanding alongside the criminal operations, the respect I'd earned, and the relationship we'd forged, I couldn't regret my choices. Not the translation work that paid my mother's bills. Not the negotiations that prevented bloodshed. Not the decision to stay when leaving would have been easier. Tell me again, Giovanni said quietly. About the first night. When you decided to accept my offer. You mean when I decided to work for a suspected crime lord? I mean when you chose survival over pride. I thought back to that restaurant in Stamford. The unopened wine bottle. The job offer that changed everything. I chose my mother's life over my illusions of moral purity. Best decision I ever made, even knowing where it would lead. No regrets? Every single day. I kissed him again. But not about this. About us. Not anymore. We stayed like that as the city lights flickered below. 2 people who'd found each other through impossible circumstances and built something worth protecting. The world outside was complicated and dangerous and morally ambiguous. But in this moment, in this space we'd created together, everything was exactly as it should be. Some love stories started with wine poured in cruelty. Some ended with wine shared in peace. Ours did both, and everything complicated in between. And that was exactly right.